The good king and his knights are ready to capture the evil Lord Vladek and his dark fortress.
I love it when the sequel sticks the landing. You see, with LEGO's in-house themes, they have a tendency to do a soft reboot when it comes to year 2 of a theme. In terms of themes we've covered on this channel already, Power Miners is a good example of this when they changed the color scheme, swapping out the orange for blue, and taking the story deeper underground. And then there's Exoforce 2, where the team ascended higher up the mountain, found new mechs, the bad guys got an upgrade too, and everything just felt a little bit different. And in the case of both of those themes, the second year did have its highlights. Think of Clawcatcher from Power Miners and Golden Guardian from Exoforce. Yet I think for the most part, those Wave 2 sets really didn't quite live up to the really high expectations set by the initial wave. Today though, as we enter the second year of Knight's Kingdom with the Wave 2 playsets, I'm happy to report that this sequel does stick the landing. Yes, everybody finds themselves getting a bit of an upgrade, things feel a little different, but the sets we're going to see here build on the story in a meaningful way and fill in a lot of the gaps that the first wave of playsets left behind. If you weren't aware already, the second year of Knight's Kingdom focuses heavily on bad guy stuff, something that was severely lacking in that first wave of playsets that we looked at. With maybe the exception of Fantasy Era Castle and its Wave 2, which gave us the Troll Warship, the Trolls Mountain Fortress, and a lot of other troll bad guy stuff, you really don't see such an emphasis on kitting out the villains like you do here in Knight's Kingdom. And the theme really benefits from it. And I think some of Knight's Kingdom's best sets come from this wave. So hey folks, let's take a closer look. Our story picks up where we left off at the end of Wave 1. Vladek's evil scheme was exposed and he was defeated in the Grand Tournament. The Kingdom of Morcia returned to a state of peace and Vladek was exiled. He spent his time getting up to no good naturally in the land of Ancoria. It was here that he began assembling a powerful magical artifact that would make his legions of Shadow Knights stronger than ever before, the Vlad Mask. Back home, King Matthias learns of these goings-on and develops a plan with his foremost trusted knights, Jaco, Raskus, Santis, and Danju. They are to infiltrate Vladek's dark fortress, open the gates from within, and allow the king's army to take down the fortress in Vladek once and for all. So let's start out with the smallest set of the wave, Fireball Catapult. As our heroes attempt to infiltrate the Shadow Knight infested lands of Ancoria, this right here is probably one of the first things they would have come up against. Despite its size, the Fireball Catapult is pretty intimidating, especially because of this crazy saw blade projectile it's launching at the knights. You get that firing action with the use of one of the large red rubber band pieces, which conveniently blends in really nice with the Vladek color scheme. The thing is pretty tricky to aim, but if it does manage to hit, yeah, you better believe it's pretty effective. The thing I want to focus on most with this set though is the minifigures. You've seen the Shadow Knight before, they are unchanged from Wave 1, and I think that's actually a really nice thing for once. It's kind of like when LEGO changes out the helmets on a clone and you feel like you need to build up a whole brand new clone army. But you can add this guy to the existing Shadow Knight army and he fits in perfectly because he's exactly the same. Someone who isn't the same though is going to be Santis, and because he is a named character, he could totally be different. Much like we saw in the action figures for this wave, the knights have been upgraded with the power of the Heart of the Shield. Some things stay the same. We've got the same sword molds, we've got the same helmet molds, we've got the same armor molds, but there's some new prints on that armor, which is really nice. Instead of Wave 1's approach where we got regular LEGO colors, this time we get metallic colors, which look really great on these guys. The shield design has also changed. Instead of that interesting octagonal design they had in Wave 1, we've gone for the more rounded classic LEGO shield. In this set, Santis gets a horse, and there's going to be a lot of horses in this wave of sets. The red horse helmet included here is actually exclusive to the set. And then mounted to the saddle, you get a nice little blue-violet flag too. At the price point, it's a great set. It doesn't contribute directly to the story, but I feel like everything that's included here provides value to both sides of your Knights Kingdom armies. The next set, though, plays a rather significant role in the story. This is Battle Wagon. There's some pretty amusing comic panels that show our heroes distracting the drivers of this wagon and eventually taking it over and using it to sneak into Ancoria. The set itself gives us 2 Shadow Knights, which again is great for building up that Shadow Knight army, and this time around we get Raskus, who has undergone a similar makeover to that of Santis. One of the best changes here is swapping out that old yellow sword for a flat dark gold one, which just looks a lot classier in my opinion. Like Santis 2, he has the updated shield design with his new printed emblem on it. His horse that he's riding too is very similar to Santis's, including another exclusive horse helmet piece, this time in green. And then Raskus here has 2 lances, one being used as an actual lance and the other carrying the flag of Morcia. We did get another battle wagon-like build in the first wave of Knights Kingdom, but I'm happy to report that this one is substantially different. Rather than being a battering ram, this is much more a prison transport sort of vehicle. And there's a lot of prison room in this battle wagon, probably enough for all 4 knights. One really fun addition here is the inclusion of these Vladek Scorpion flags, something that's going to show up in a lot of these other Wave 2 sets. They've got this ripped, tattered look about them too, which is really cool. Atop the wagon is a standard Lego Castle Catapult that launches these 2x2 transparent round bricks at enemies. Another interesting piece that they've included here is the horse hitch in dark red, which is actually exclusive to the set. As shown in the comics that are in the end of each instruction booklet for the wave, the trespassing knights are eventually caught. It's at this point that Danju decides to sacrifice himself for the team, creating a diversion and allowing the other 3 knights to escape. Danju is captured and his fate is unknown. The knights are going to have to make a difficult decision. Do they go ahead with the quest or do they save their friend Danju? We'll get back to this very pressing story point in a bit, don't worry. Acting as a nice foil to our last set, we get King's Siege Tower. The design of this one is much more similar to the Wave 1 Vladek siege engine. This one is definitely meant for sieging the Dark Fortress. In the comics, it shows that the King's army would have many of these going along with it. So I guess if you were crazy enough, you could have bought a ton of these. And if you had been crazy enough to do that, you would actually get 2 Shadow Knights per set, which is, again, really, really nice that they are shoving these sets full of Shadow Knights. We also get King Matthias, who kind of disappointingly is unchanged from Wave 1. I would have liked to have seen some upgraded prints to match his action figure for this wave, which did get a facelift compared to the Wave 1 version. And then the set also includes Jaco. Yeah, there's 4 minifigures in this set, which is pretty significant. Jaco's also gotten an upgrade like the other knights. He's got the new shield with the new print and the armor with the new print, and then he also has a different color sword, going from that reddish gold now to the flat silver. One of the techniques that this siege tower takes from Vladek's siege tower in Wave 1 is using those action figure shields to build up the bulk of the walls of the tower. This time around, we get the hard plastic, beautifully designed King Matthias shield, one on each side of the tower. They are pretty extravagant pieces, to be sure, but it adds a lot of detail that just otherwise would not have been here on the siege tower. At the base, there is a battering ram as well. It's not quite as fun as Vladek's, but there is a fun little geared mechanism that allows you to move it back and forth. The 2x2 rounded elements that make up the log there are exclusive to this set in reddish brown, and that black silver speckled boulder at the front is a rare element, only being included in one other set, the Viking Fortress. The bridge here can move up and down, but there's nothing to hold it in place, which is kind of disappointing. And then at the top of the tower, you get the heart of the shield, which is just one of those disc pieces in transparent neon orange. We last left the group with a difficult decision to continue the mission or to rescue Danju. Jaco decides to take charge here, saying that he will go find Danju while the other 2 continue without them. They agree and part ways. Jaco follows Danju to where he's been locked up at the next set, Scorpion Prison Cave. This is our first taste of the bad guy castle, and I rather quite like it. The outpost here is built atop some reddish brown rocks, and it gives the build some really nice height. The build is hinged too to give it a little more interesting composition. But before we get any further on that, let's take a look at the side builds here. The first here is this rideable scorpion. It's very interesting and has all sorts of crazy implications for Knight's Kingdom. It definitely shows that there is a certain level of magic within this world. If I'm not mistaken, there's a card on this one as well. There's some great parts usage on this scorpion too, with the claws, which are empty magnet holders, interestingly enough. I think that's brilliant. And now we've seen a lot of horses in this wave of sets already, but this one is pretty insane. On one side, we have a mini catapult, a design that we'll be seeing a few more times in this video, and it works quite well. It flings 1x1 cylinder bricks. On the other side of the horse, you actually have a storage barrel, so you can hold on to an extra projectile, which is nice. That brown barrel piece, interestingly enough, in this color is exclusive to this set. We get some pretty cool minifigures this time around too. We've seen Jaco before, we've seen a Shadow Knight before, but this set finally gives us the new upgraded version of Vladek. Vladek has swapped out his red sword for a more menacing, darker black sword, and interestingly, he has the other type of classic shield here, printed of course with his scorpion emblem. And then we get the last of the 4 knights here, Danju. Danju continues to be the rarest of the knights here in Wave 2, just like he was in Wave 1 as well, being only included in 2 sets. This one, and then the big set we'll see at the end. Since Raskus now has the dark flat gold sword, Danju gets the reddish gold sword that would have been Jaco's in Wave 1. One of the coolest features of this set is the opening gate, which works surprisingly well. The gate is made up of black fence pieces, which isn't too common of a recolor, but simply turning this crank here very quickly opens that up, leaving plenty of room for a horse to fit on underneath. If you remember anything from Wave 1 of Knight's Kingdom, it's that Knight's Kingdom does not do interiors very well. In fact, this whole era of LEGO was really bad at doing interiors. There is plenty of space on the inside of this model, but there is literally nothing going on, which is a pity, because there's a lot of potential here. What you gonna do? Populate it yourself, I guess. Up on top, you get a balcony for Vladek to look on out over, and then you even get this nice stairway up to the top, which features the same catapult that Jaco is using on his horse. All around, you've got some banners, and then we even get a floppy arm skeleton out front, which is always a huge plus. And here's Danju sitting out here in a cage. And as depicted in the comics, of course, over a big pit of lava. Vladek definitely has a flair for the dramatic and isn't too interested in just killing Danju right then and there. He wants to slowly lower him into the volcano, of course. Thankfully, that's gonna give Jaco plenty of time to rescue him and save him from danger. It's not exactly clear how he gets away with all of this, but we're happy that he does. Who doesn't love Danju? He's the Purple Knight, that's so cool. It's at this point that everyone is going to hightail it to Vladek's Dark Fortress. And there's only one more obstacle that stands in our hero's way. And that obstacle is the Dark Fortress Landing. Our knights must sail in from the sea and pass this one outpost before they can finally get to Vladek's Dark Fortress. This set here shares a lot of similarities with Vladek's Siege Engine and Knight's Castle Wall from Wave 1, as it was sold as part of a combo pack. The 2 sets are listed separately on Brickset and Bricklink, but I really don't even know if you could buy them separately. At least it would have been a pretty uncommon thing to have seen here in the States. For the purpose of this video though, we're gonna view the 2 sets independently. Dark Fortress Landing gives you yet another Shadow Knight, which is awesome, and then you get Vladek here again, which is actually pretty nice. He's a really cool figure, and I mean, having multiple options to get him is always a good thing. Perhaps my favorite part of this set is just the little side build. It's just this tiny little boat, made from one of the classic reddish-brown bolt hull pieces, and then as a sail, it's got one of those flags that we've been seeing in a few of these sets. You know, what is this, less than 10 pieces, but pretty effective, pretty cool. Really sells the idea that this castle is built on the shore too. Like Scorpion Prison Cave, this castle is built up off the ground. That's accomplished using just a couple of very large pieces. The big ugly rock piece in reddish brown, and then these big slanted wall panels, which are nicely printed. There's no stickers in Knight's Kingdom at all. Once you land at the dock here, you can take the steps up to the top, where these nice little mini doors will grant you entry into this little outpost. But if the Shadow Knight above doesn't think you should be entering through those doors, there's a fun little defense mechanism here, where you can drop some hot coals on any trespassers. It's a rather unique way of dumping hot coals on people. That's a concept that we've seen pop up in Castle time and time again, but I like this unique approach. And yeah, no surprises here, there's no interior in this thing, though there's plenty of room for one. The last thing of note is going to be the flag that's over here in the balcony. This is kind of a cool effect, like a curtain of sorts. The flags always came in pairs, so they always had to find a home for both. But that's it for Dark Fortress Landing. Let's take a look at its sister set, Knight's Attack Barge. All right, I'm gonna just come out and say it. This set is weird. I mean, it looks like a D-Day vessel, not some medieval warship. It would have been really cool to have seen a more standard flagship, but I suppose Knight's Kingdom has always been a little more modern in its appearance, so it does fit the vibe, I guess. One thing that's really nice about it though is that we get those same flag pieces that would have been included in the Castle of Morcia, this time in a much more affordable set. And you get all three. You get the big one in the back, and then you get the two smaller ones here. Great stuff. For minifigures, you get Raskus and Santis. And then in terms of functionality, you can raise and lower the front here to lead your attack on the Dark Fortress Landing. And then there's a catapult here too. It's a similar design as the one that we saw mounted to the horse in Scorpion Prison Cave, just at a larger scale. It can fire larger projectiles, which are the 2x2 rounded dome pieces. There you go. And that's about it. I remember as a kid, I always loved these lantern things. This is a design that shows up all the time in Harry Potter sets, and I just kind of like that little connection there. Interior in this really spacious looking back part of the boat? No, of course not. But yeah, when you put this side by side with Dark Fortress Landing, it makes sense, and I guarantee it was a ton of fun. Perhaps the most interesting and surprising thing about these two sets that I noticed while I was looking through the instruction booklets is that there are actually alternate builds for both of these. Something that weirdly enough does not show up in the normal sets. These would have been like a special edition release, just not as readily available as some of the other sets. They're just so unique in that regard. For Dark Fortress Landing, you get a tower with a boat, just kind of a different configuration of the existing build, but it looks rather interesting. But they really got creative with Knight's Attack Barge, turning it into this weird bridge crossing thing. It's super creative, it looks really funky, but I mean, you're working with boat pieces here, so turning that into a structure is pretty impressive. But yeah, kind of just makes me wish we had gotten alternate builds for all the sets in this wave. But anyway, before we get to the big set, Vladek's Dark Fortress, we're gonna take a look at a few of the gear items that would have been released in 2005. Knight's Kingdom is one of those themes that just had an absolute ton of gear items. Not just in 2004, but also in 2005, and then again for Wave 3, which we'll take a look at in a future video. I tried to get as many as I can, but the simple fact of it is that some of these things are just really hard to find these days. There were magnets, foam swords, helmets. My brother and I actually had Vladek's mask, like a wearable mask. So cool. I think the elastic broke and it got thrown out, which is a pity because I would have worn that for this whole video if I still had it. And one of the big things, especially for 2005, was just a lot of party favors. We're talking decorations, stationery, all that sorts of stuff. And one of the things that I do have, invitations for your Knight's Kingdom birthday party. Are these not the coolest thing ever? I cannot wait to send these out to my buddies for my 26th birthday. It says you're invited to a birthday gala in honor of your name, date, time, the kingdom in which you reside, and then your RSVP. Amazing stuff. I had to open a pack, but I've got a sealed pack too because this is gonna be worth big bucks. In terms of other fun stuff I've got here, I've got one of the keychains released in 2005, still with the tag on it, kind of exciting. This is King Matthias. And then you've got the little Lego tag on there too, which would have been standard practice back in the day. I don't think they do these anymore. Kind of like that they did. So in case you didn't know what a minifigure was, you could figure out that it was Lego. And then this here is really special. So this was gifted to me by one of my channel members, along with some Knight's Kingdom trading cards. And that's Bad Panda. It was so nice of him to send this to me. This is a stamp kit. So what's included here are 5 stamps of the shields of the 5 main characters. So you got Jaco, Santis, Raskus, Danju, and then Vladek. And they're all color-coded too. This thing was sealed, so I cracked it open, and the stamps still worked. This is almost 20 years old, and there was still wet ink in there. That was really, really awesome. I had a lot of fun. I'm just gonna start stamping anything I can with these from now on. Of course, my invitations, you know, I'm gonna be stamping all those. Probably be stamping my forehead. So one of the only other readily available gear items was a magnet pack of King Matthias, the 4 Knights, and Vladek. You can buy that in the US sealed, but it's like over $100. So if someone wants to grab that, get it now. It's still on Bricklink. I believe the magnets are implanted into the legs of the minifigures. So they don't have those kind of obnoxious little magnet stands. But they're rather just independent minifigures, which is kind of cool. And these are the Wave 2 Year 2 Knights Kingdom guys. All right, one more set to go in our Knights Kingdom 2 Wave 2 Part 2 video. You're really gonna like this one. We finally made it, gang, to the largest Knights Kingdom set ever. And boy, is this thing a beauty. This is Vladek's Dark Fortress. It has been a dream set of mine for a long time, and this video finally gave me the excuse to buy it, and I am so excited to share it with you. Putting it on this dinky little table was ridiculous, but you gotta do what you gotta do. There is so much stuff here. Let's talk about that. I wrote all this down last year, so forgive the slightly outdated references, but I think you'll catch on. Back in 2005, this set would have cost you $100. And obviously that's not fair to compare today. So inflation adjusted, you're looking at over $150, pushing $160 for however many pieces that was. It's like $960 or something like that. But this is the kicker, the weight. People like to go on about price per piece, and that's all fine and good. It's a nice, quick, easy metric to determine whether or not you're getting scammed by a Lego, but it's not always 100% fair. If you're just talking about sheer amount of plastic, you want to do price per weight. So let's look at that today. This thing, according to Bricklink, clocks in at 2,782 grams. So I decided, hey, let's look at modern sets at about that $150 price point and see what they weigh. So there's the Harry Potter 20th Anniversary Hogwarts Castle Chamber of Secrets. Costs $150, but what does it weigh? 1,859 grams. More than 900 grams lighter than this. Or there's the Technic Material Handler, coming in at 1,400 grams. That's half the weight of this for what is the same equivalent price. There's the Avatar Tree of Souls. That's 1,714 grams. Again, a whole 1,000+ grams lighter than this. Also $150. The only set that I could find that actually fared better in the price per weight category was the Rolling Stones art set. But those art sets just tend to be a better deal anyway. That was 3,040 grams, some 300 grams heavier than this one. So yeah, quite interesting. Though I must stress that in a lot of cases, Lego is generally better priced than it was during this time. But anyway, I hope someone found that kind of interesting. Does it matter at all anymore? No, because it costs like $500 to get a new one of these. But a used one could be obtained for less than $200, which honestly isn't all that bad of a deal. This set starts out with a pretty epic lineup of minifigures. You've got the whole squad here: Jaco, Raskus, Santis, and Danju. Of course, you get that new updated version of Vladek, and then you get what are called Elite Shadow Knights. These guys are pretty cool because they're decked out in that black silver speckled armor, which just is a great look. The weirdest thing about them though is that they all seem to be like Vladek clones or something because they all have his head. Now that I think about it, there is a trading card, but I don't think it explains the really uncanny resemblance to their leader. In addition to the massive castle, you also get some side builds for the good guys to attack it with. Like we've seen in many of the other sets up until this point, we get a totally decked out horse. This time it's for Jaco. Yet again, it's very similar to the one that was included in Scorpion Prison Cave, except this time it doesn't have the container to hold extra ammo, meaning that this horse falls over really easily because it's horribly unbalanced with this massive catapult mounted to the one side and a spear. There's another horse in the set too, and this one's a little bit more interesting. It's pulling a much larger catapult behind it. The horse itself, in the case of this set, has an exclusive blue colored helmet, though there are variations of this set that have that horse with a blue violet helmet, like the one that was included in the Castle of Morcia from Knights Kingdom Wave 1. The catapult works exactly like you would expect it to, launching that brown boulder into the Dark Fortress. But what's really interesting is that on the sides of the catapult are these exclusive printed shields, printed with that blue-violet color. It's the older style of shield from Wave 1 of Knights Kingdom 2. So it's a very interesting addition here. Very nice, but I really don't know why they decided to print this brand new piece for this tiny little, rather insignificant cart. Then we get this. Sorry, Raskus. Then we get this. I really don't know how this thing is supposed to work. You see the classic rubber-tipped projectile, which has been used in spring-loaded shooters for years, but in this little build, there's no spring-loaded shooter. You're expected to fire off the projectile yourself, somehow. I actually went and looked through other reviews of this set to see if I had built it wrong or see if someone else had figured it out. And I just saw a bunch of other people struggling with it too. It's a goofy little mechanism. You know, that was actually pretty good compared to some of the other launches I've had. But it still has nothing on the classic spring-loaded shooter. A really weird choice. But it's fun to see the Knights Kingdom action figure armor brought in here for this ballista. I think that works pretty nicely. The last of the side builds is this little battering ram, which is really cute. It can be held by two minifigures, which is where we're going to pick up our story. Santis and Raskus use this to break into the Dark Fortress through a weak spot on the bottom. There's this 1x6x5 wall panel that can be pushed over. That's an exclusive print to this set too. A very similar design to those angled wall panels that we saw in Dark Fortress Landing, and they're all over the place on this castle too. Once they break in, Raskus and Santis are going to be able to open the door from the inside and allow the armies of Morcia to take the Dark Fortress. Without that brilliant plan though, they would definitely be up against some tough stuff. The only other real way to break into this castle is through the front gate, and that's what I really like about it so much. It's all raised off the ground substantially, with again a lot of those big wall panel pieces and also some of that reddish brown terrain. It just gives the whole castle a much more striking and interesting look and plays into the story too. This is not a place you can just casually walk up to and break in. It's worth pointing out too that brown lerp seen at the base is only included in two other sets. One of which we saw before, that's Citadel of Orlan from Wave 1. The front entrance is pretty fun. It's got these big silver swords on either side. That's Vladek's sword from the Wave 1 action figure, recolored here into the silver. The drawbridge can indeed be raised to make access into the fortress even more difficult. But if you do get across that, your troubles are not over yet. You'll have to smash down these big, beautiful, dark red doors. But while you're doing that, somebody might just drop some hot coals on you from above. It's a classic, simple, very effective little mechanism. The black gears here used to raise the drawbridge are actually pretty uncommon. They're only included in two other sets as well. Beyond the elevated position of the castle, there's plenty of other defenses too, including these massive catapults with the trans neon orange saw blades, similar to that included in the Fireball catapult set, the smallest set of this wave. It makes use of a very unique design to get those to launch, sitting atop a rubber band on the back, but works really well. There's plenty of teeth and spears poking out all over the walls on the sides too. Let's break in and take a look at the interior on the right wing of the castle. Yeah, continuing the rather unfortunate trend of Knights Kingdom sets, the interior isn't amazing, but at least there's some stuff going on. For instance, right on the other side of that breakable wall, there's just a pit of scorpions, of course. A pit of red scorpions, to be precise. An element that isn't all too common, only appearing in 3 other sets. Nicely, you do get stairs leading up to the second level. There is one of those rotating walls. One side has a window and the other side has a wonderful floppy armed skeleton. Gotta include one of those in a castle like this. Beyond that, there's just a lot of weapons, spears, and a crossbow on the wall. You also get a spider web, which is surprisingly noteworthy. There are plenty of light gray variations of this web, included in like a lot of Harry Potter sets like you see behind me, but the light bluish gray one is a bit more uncommon, only having appeared in this set and a Belleville set of all things. One of my dream Belleville sets. There's a lot of weird pieces in that one. If we make our way over, you can see what's going on in the central tower. Not a whole lot. There's plenty of room to pose figures in and stuff, and that's always great. We have a few interesting things on the interior of the opposite side. We got a little fire pit again, and then we get this crystal orb, which I imagine Vladek uses to see what's going on inside of Morcia from the safety of his fortress. If you haven't seen this particular element before, you're probably not alone. It definitely blew my mind when I saw it for the first time. It appears in one other Belleville set in this specific color, trans medium blue, but it's actually been produced in a surprising number of colors, mainly through the Scala theme. It originally showed up in 1998, and it's also made in white, red, salmon, orange, yellow, and medium lime. It makes for a perfect little crystal ball. Definitely one of my favorite pieces in this set. Continuing on to the second level, very similar to the other side of the castle with some spears and a crossbow mounted on the wall, and then nothing else beyond that above. The one last place to explore is that central tower. If we go up to the first balcony, you'll see a place that you can conveniently reload the hot coal barrel. You just drop the pieces in here and they funnel into place. Interestingly, those 2x2 corner slopes are actually exclusive to this set in reddish brown. Oh, and speaking of exclusive pieces, that red door that you find behind is also exclusive to this set. Above that, you have the Vlad mask itself. Again, it's done up in that black silver special finish and it looks spectacular because of it. The way it's attached is really interesting. This piece is actually the same one that's included in the Vladek action figure as his mask, just recolored here. And if I'm not mistaken, they will reuse this piece in the Wave 3 action figures. But it's held in place by the Technic rubber pieces. The idea is that if you somehow... Man, there goes another one. But the idea is that if somehow you get this ballista working, you could use it to knock the mask off, rendering Vladek's empowered forces useless and defeating him. Unsurprisingly, nothing in the interior of, well, any of the central tower, but it does look great from the outside. Setting this model side by the castle of Morcia is kind of like a childhood dream come true. Having your armies gather in the middle here would just be so epic with a castle on either side. Again, it goes back to how I started out this video. These two waves just complement each other so well. Having a bad guy castle that's as big, probably bigger than the good guy castle, but very distinct stylistically, absolutely awesome. I know it doesn't sound particularly groundbreaking or profound when I say the biggest set of the wave, you know, the set that has almost 4 times more pieces than the next largest set is the best of the wave. But if doing these revisiting videos has taught me anything, it's that the biggest set is not always the best. I mean, can you tell me that the titanium command rig from Power Miners is better than Thunder Driller? Or how about Ogle's Mountain Fortress in Alpha Team Deep Freeze? I'm still taking Ice Blade over that one any day. So to get a set like this to cap off the wave is a beautiful treat. It is probably one of the most striking castles that the LEGO Group has ever done. But there you go. That wraps up the second year of Knights Kingdom. Clearly, obviously, my views are so tainted by nostalgia when it comes to this theme. This was my childhood Hood theme. This was my gateway drug into Lego. But I like to think at least some 20 years later, I can look back on the theme with a bit of objectivity and judge it on its merits. And merits there are. The way Wave 2 balances out Wave 1 is brilliant. Knight's Kingdom really executes this in a way that few other themes ever have. The sets, of course, once again, fall victim to juniorization. We're looking at a lot of big pieces here. A Scorpion Prison Cave especially comes to mind. It's a quite substantial model, somehow made up of only 250 pieces. But this here isn't even 1,000 pieces. A 1,000-piece set today is nothing, you know? It's like this big. You got a lot of bang for your buck in the juniorization phase. This style of building isn't going to be for everyone. There's a million ways in which this can be improved aesthetically, but as a toy aimed at like 6 to 8-year-olds, it's kind of brilliant. And that's where its value lies. That's why people like myself look back on this theme so fondly. The build process was easy and it didn't scare us off. It eased us into the Lego hobby, and here I am, here you are, all these years later. But this isn't the end of Knight's Kingdom either. There's actually one more year to go, and that includes a wave of buildable action figures and another wave of playsets. And don't worry, I'll be covering both of those in separate videos in an extraordinary, almost unnecessary amount of detail too, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But that's all I've got for this one. If you somehow sat through this whole thing, made it this far, have yourself a fantastic life, and I'll see you next time.